An unfortunate realization that a lot of people get when they learn a language is that a different language isn't just the same system with different words. For example, in English, we can say many different expressions to mean the same thing. So, that's it, that's enough, that's all, that's the end, I'm done. All mean the same thing, right? And there's tons of examples of words that are untranslatable. The first one I can think of is like Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in someone else's pain. Or there's the word umami, which is talking about a specific taste that we haven't really talked about ever in English. But usually those words can get imported really easily, and they normally have the same meaning. But we can't get too comfortable with words that sound the same. Of course, there's many false friends, words that sound really similar. So for example, bâtir in French means to build or construct, and bâtir in Spanish means to fight or battle. Entendre in French means to hear, but entender in Spanish means to understand. 新闻 in Chinese means the news, the thing you watch every day, the thing that helps you know about the world. But in Japanese, shinbun just means newspaper. And usually these differences are the result of languages diverging, right? Maybe at one time they had the same meaning, but they change depending on the needs of the speakers of that language. I think what's more interesting is when words get imported into a language, but the nuance changes a little. It means the same thing, but we're talking about slightly different things. For example, I've heard a lot of Koreans use some collective words in English as individual items of that collective. So just a few example sentences. I have families in many countries. I have a lot of schedules today. I want to order a few menus. We have a lot of interesting cultures during this holiday. From their perspective, a lot of Korean words have a very precise meaning, and they're viewed very individually. And in general, the language doesn't really try to make a big distinction between collectives and individual members of a collective. In English, though, we have family and we have family member. We're really strict about this, right? Menu and schedule are words that have been imported into Korean, but family and culture are not words that are imported into the language at all. So they may be incorrectly mistranslating menu or schedule, but the pattern still exists for those words family or culture. And this exact difference is showing how the natives think of these words, which can't really be learned in one lesson. And I think that's impossible to master when you're learning a language, how a native thinks about a word. Even if you learn many different vocab words and you're very skilled at learning a lot of words, you may not be able to understand how a native conceptualizes a word unless you hear it being used many times and you see it interacting with other words. And of course, the solution to this problem is to always learn vocab in context. Never just read a dictionary entry, read a whole sentence of somebody using a word. And this is probably part of the language that you will never master. You will never be done with this process of learning words and their nuances. The languages really have a limited amount of grammar points to learn, but they almost have infinite amounts of vocab to learn. And it'll take an extreme amount of effort to learn about the nuances of every word and how they interact with other ones. Then there is another problem that I face sometimes, and I think other learners have this problem too. We always want to translate our thoughts exactly how they are into the target language, but then you run the risk of sounding awkward. Think of it this way. If you want the Wi-Fi password in English, you might say, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" or "Can you give me the Wi-Fi password?" But if somebody came up to you and said, "I want the Wi-Fi password," this is going to sound a little forceful and a little rude. And it's the same in any target language. We love asking questions instead of making direct commands in English, but some other languages are the opposite. They will say their command directly instead of asking you a question in an indirect way. And this kind of thing takes so much effort when you're learning a language. I noticed this most strongly with Korean and Japanese, which kind of encourage some kind of constructions based on their structure and what words they have available. In those languages, they have really precise nouns. For example, we have the word completion in English. In Korean, however, they have a distinction between completing the construction of something or completing the process of something. They have 완성 and they have 완료. And this is different from English, structurally because in English we have more meaningful verbs and more precise verbs. In English we have the verb fill out, which I think is extremely specific. We have a verb dedicated to completing documents and forms. I think that's pretty incredible when I look at other languages and they don't have a verb for documents. And I've noticed this has a very interesting effect on the wording of sentences in Korean and Japanese. Of course, they have different sentence structures. So first it's subject, then object, then verb. But if you translate those things literally, there's still a nuanced difference there. The center point of the meaning in a Korean sentence seems to be those meaningful nouns. Of course, verbs go last and that kind of gives them a little bit of emphasis, but you still hear things emphasizing the noun, such as, it's a gift that I bought yesterday. But in English, I would want to say something like, I bought this yesterday. So in the Korean and Japanese sentence, gift is really that centerpiece, but in the English sentence, bought is that centerpiece. And I think that's really a hard thing about learning languages, learning how they word things differently. Not just false friends, not just learning a lot of vocab, but really the structure affecting how you would word something in a language. Learning a new language requires you to internalize some rules that you can't ever explicitly find. Each language has like a different selection of words for you to have, a vocab, but all those dictionaries are missing the importance of different vocab words. If you were to list out the 1,000 most important words in English, it would be a completely different list from Chinese. Of course, you'll have some similar vocab words in there, but Chinese people talk about things in a different way than English speakers. In English, when we want to talk about something positive, we'll probably say that it's fun or interesting or exciting. But I remember in Japanese class, we were learning words like nigiyaka, tanoshii. In different languages, you're probably going to comment on things a little differently. In English, we have this word lively, like in Japanese, but I don't think it's a really common word. So I think it would be kind of strange to say something positive about a place and say that it's lively. We can say that, but it's just not in our most common vocab. So you can kind of see how on a macro scale this can affect the wording of a sentence. This is like a really interesting topic to me, and this is kind of something that gives infinite depth to learning languages. You will never fully internalize how a language words things, but you can only keep trying, and I think that's the fun part to me. It can be a little discouraging to know that will never be complete, but it's a fun part of the language learning process that I really do enjoy. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one, okay? Bye-bye.